After an ugly Week 1 loss to the Vikings, the national media was out in full force this week with hot takes against the Falcons and tough questions for Coach Dan Quinn. However, on today's show, I'm going to explain why it's way too early to panic about the Falcons. It's all on the way next on AJC Falcons News Now.
This is AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite. Here are your hosts, Brandon Adams and former Atlanta Falcon Chuck Smith.
Hello everyone and welcome into AJC Falcons News Now. My name is Brandon Adams and this is the former Atlanta Falcon himself, Chuck Smith. A lot for us to get into over the course of the next hour here as we look ahead to Sunday night and the Falcons and the Philadelphia Eagles. And Chuck, one of the things we're going to spend a good bit of time talking about today is, first of all, for the Falcons fans, obviously you understand the concern going back to what happened last Sunday against the Minnesota Vikings. And yet some of the national stuff that we've heard, I think, is a total overreaction. I think a lot of the national media is stepping up, trying to get their pound of flesh of Atlanta. I think they've simply made too much out of Week 1.
Well, I agree, and that always happens, particularly when you got a team like the Falcons that their expectations are Super Bowl. So somewhat of it's good because the national expectations, for the Falcons to have a chance to play for the championship. But think about the NFL. Cleveland got beat down this week. Think of all the teams that were disrespected from a standpoint because the expectations were high. The Browns, just like the Falcons. So I just think it has a lot to do with the expectations of this Falcons team when you look at where they're supposed to be.
Before we get up and rolling, I'll tell you, we're going to take a lot of your comments today, your thoughts on how Atlanta gets it done on Sunday against the Philadelphia Eagles, or whatever your prediction is for what might happen. We'll give you a chance to talk about that here today on AJC Falcons News Now, presented by Miller Lite. And speaking of Miller Lite, they do bring this to you. You know, it tastes great, and it's just 96 calories. It's the original light beer, and it's the official beer of the Atlanta Falcons. It's great to have Miller Lite with us all season long. Great to have all of you with us there as well. So let's kind of chronicle and catalog just for a moment everything that's been said here over the course of the last week. National media weighing in. You said this happens every year. You're right about that. There's always a tendency to overrate what happened in Week 1. And for Falcons fans, admittedly, they hope this is an overreaction. They hope that too much is being made of what happened in Minnesota against the Vikings. Otherwise, it could be bad news for the Falcons this season. But with 15 games remaining, that provides 15 chances for Atlanta to go out there and correct the record that was established against the Vikings. However, that does not mean there aren't some legitimate concerns. Let me start with Rodney Harrison, former New England Patriot, member of the NBC Sunday night broadcast. I think of Rodney as a pretty good analyst. Mm-hmm. And you know, Harrison, when he weighed in on the Falcons this week in the aftermath of what happened there against Minnesota, one of the things that Rodney said is that for a lot of Falcons fans maybe fixated on one side of the ball, it actually may be the other side of the ball that ends up being the issue. Here is what Rodney Harrison said about that.
People in Atlanta, they're worried about the offense, but personally I'm worried about the defense. Lack of physicality, Dan Quinn took over too many big plays and a lot of missed tackles.
So when you hear Harrison say there that, listen, this is more about the defense. Obviously, we talked a lot in some of our previous shows, going back to Monday, for instance, about not stopping Dalvin Cook. You know, giving Minnesota too much of a chance to establish a physical style of play in that Week 1 game. How much are you with Rodney Harrison on this, that what plagues Atlanta, especially moving into Philadelphia this week, is more about the defensive side of the ball than the offensive?
Brandon, I'm not trying to pile on, but I talked about it last week, the physicality of the Falcons coming out, and I didn't like it. When I talked about watching, the play I think about the most was when Deion Jones got ran over on the sideline. It just set a precedent. Also, Isaiah Oliver, early on when he didn't go try to make a tackle, he had a chance for a big hit, and he doesn't take that shot. So I understand what Rodney's saying, because this Falcons team, they went from a 4-3 now to 3-4. What Rodney's saying, there is something to it about the physicality and the energy or the lack of energy that they didn't have coming out, which has been well documented this week by the coaches.
Sure. So I can kind of get with Rodney Harrison on this a little bit. I can kind of understand where he's coming from. However, there were some people here this week who I thought were just kind of out there on an island, and I personally thought trying to make too much of what happened for Atlanta a week ago. Not to say that there aren't some legitimate concerns, and you've done a good job of cataloging those. You've addressed those. We've heard from plenty of Falcons fans in our comment section here on AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite, who can certainly talk about a lot of this kind of stuff. You don't want to completely downplay this from the standpoint of what Atlanta needs to improve on. However, at the same time, you don't want to make more of this than what it is. Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, made me an example of the opposite on this, also speaking on one of the NBC broadcasts this week, using that opportunity of the Vikings win against the Falcons to kind of go in on the organization, harkening back to obviously the disappointing loss in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, suggesting that somehow that hangover still impacts the Falcons in 2019. To me, this is nonsensical. Also pretty critical of Dan Quinn here, too. Here's Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk.
I just think this is going to be a long year for the Falcons. It was an ugly opening game, and I know it would have been hard to win in Minnesota week 1, but I think they're going to lose this one to the Eagles, and they're going to fall to 0-2, and they're going to get desperate very quickly, especially as they see the Saints possibly going to 2-0, the Panthers or the Buccaneers at 1-1, and you start seeing everybody fading in front of you. I just think that this could be a long year for the Falcons with big changes after this season, and I think the Falcons lose this one.
So on the one hand, we have the benefit of something that we know now that Florio didn't know when he said that, which is we got a chance to see Tampa and Carolina last night. You know, Florio used the word desperate in his description of what Atlanta might become. I wouldn't have even agreed with him on the idea of this being a desperate Falcons team at the beginning of the week. And last night's game between Tampa and Carolina, I think, proves my point even further. Odds are New Orleans is probably a pretty good team, right? Yes. Good performance on Monday against Houston. That's a pretty good matchup, and New Orleans, does a good job of defending its home turf there. However, Tampa and Carolina are average as grits, Chuck. They're average as grits. So this idea that somehow the season's going to get away from Atlanta through 2 weeks, I just don't see that being the case whatsoever, because this is a division door that's going to remain open no matter what happens on Sunday night.
Well, my point comes with Florio when you're saying the season's basically over.
Yeah.
Shame on him, really, from the standpoint of you're a professional, journalist, and you come out and know the history of the game and say that this team is over and they're going to panic and it has something to do with what happened a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Absolutely not true. This team has been built to win. This team has guys at every level. And I said this also last week. Grady not turning it down. Dan Quinn is going to have the guys playing hard. You got Julio. We already know his DNA. Matt Ryan ain't no punk. He takes the hits and he'll keep back going. He threw that as a punk, but he's not a punk.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, so when guys say stuff like that, to me it's about jumping out there and have the biggest shock talk.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But to me that's absolutely ridiculous what Florio said.
Mark Barron, watching us on Facebook, says it's not too early to push the panic button. Mark apparently did not like what he saw from the Falcons last week against the Vikings. So as a way of contrasting that just a little bit, let's talk about what some of the other folks around the national media have said this week, maybe shedding a little bit more positive light on not just the Falcons for the rest of the season, but even Atlanta against Philadelphia on Sunday night. Let me start here with Pete Prisco, CBS Sports, appearing on CBS HQ this week. Not only is he not done with the Falcons for the full season, he actually expects a better performance from Atlanta against Philadelphia on Sunday night. Here's Pete Prisco from CBS.
That was a bad performance by them, and now they lost their right guard, Chris Lindstrom, the rookie out of BC. So, they got to protect Matt Ryan. That was the whole focus of the entire offseason. Now they got to regroup and do a better job with backup. That's a concern. And they traditionally have not played well against the Eagles. Having said that, I think this is a spot where they do get back on offense. I think offensively they're too good. They didn't get the wide receivers involved enough last week. I think they do this week. This might be a track meet up and down the field.
Let me give you also one more on this topic there as well. You hear Prisco making the case for Atlanta playing better against Philadelphia. How about Kyle Brandt from Good Morning Football this week on the NFL Network going so far to say that some of the things that people are reading into Atlanta from week 1 against the Vikings, that maybe the evidence from that loss to Minnesota doesn't quite add up to be the way that you think it might be. Here's Kyle Brandt from the NFL Network.
Matt Ryan, we can talk about. That defense got their butts kicked yesterday. All those guys were in Keanu last year. Deion Jones was out, got their butts kicked. But I will still stick by this, and you can spread this to any team you want. 1 year ago today, we were talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going into New Orleans and hanging 48 points on the Saints. Looked terrible. They had nothing. Ryan Fitzpatrick lit them up. And then they go to the NFC title game. You can go down the line about teams that looked great in week 1, ended up 3-13, looked terrible, go to the Super Bowl. It happens every year. Week 1 is a liar, and I think it's lying about the Falcons.
So obviously Kyle Brandt there making his case for Atlanta playing better here moving on. Now, not everybody agrees. Danny Griffith watching in our Facebook comment section with some harsh words for Dirk Cutter. The Falcons, bringing him back to run the offense here. So a lot of Falcons fans want to see it. They want to be shown, not told here, and I completely understand that. But Chuck, I'm going to be more on the side of guys like Brandt and Prisco, maybe some of the other national media members who kind of look at this what it is, a very winnable division in the NFC South, even if the Falcons are an imperfect team right now, and an NFC scenario overall that's still wide open. You're not going to make strong determinations on this after 1 week. And as you said before, we have a history, years and years and years, of seeing a lot of week one stuff that ends up being a false positive. What was mentioned a moment ago with Tampa and New Orleans from last year is just the latest example of that.
I don't care what Florio says, and I don't even really care from a fan standpoint when they think about the season's over. I respect the fans' point of view or Florio, but the facts remain. Teams continue to compete. Things change around very fast. And I've been a part of teams that have done that and rolled, but I've also been a part of teams that fell apart. So to me, the Falcons have as just as good as opportunity as anyone. And what I expect this week, the Falcons are going to come out fast. Hold me to it now. The Falcons are going to come out fast, and they have a chance to not only go in there and beat the Eagles, they have a chance to go in there and rough the Eagles up. Remember I said it? Because they have been embarrassed. They have been ashamed. And you don't think they take that lightly? So my point is this. They'll come in, they'll fix the things they need to because they got ashamed. And then how about they take a lot of credit away from Minnesota? Okay, Minnesota can't play. Oh, so give Minnesota a little bit, but also the Falcons didn't get the job done. No hiding that. But they have a chance this week, and I think they're going to right the ship.
And I think what you're saying there is really important. I don't think anyone, certainly not me, going to try to explain away what you saw from Atlanta. It was a debacle last week in Minnesota. But as Chuck said, you know, the Vikings have a strong chance to be a playoff team coming out of the North there.
But piling on, excuse me to cut off, but
go ahead.
The fans piling on at the end of the day.
Right.
Look at how your team is built. For all these years, we wanted to have a GM that would get the talent. Oh, we beat Thomas up. Now they got the talent, right? Now we throwing the towel. We got Julio. You got Matt Ryan. No matter what you think, the guy was the MVP. You got Freeman. You got Sanu. Again, I said it about Matt Ryan. These aren't no weak dudes. So they're built to win. And so for anybody to come out here and say that these guys are all these other things, all these different things that they're saying about the Falcons, to me it's ludicrous. And if you say those kind of things, if you think one game and you're going to panic, you absolutely know nothing about the National Football League.
I think that's well said. Let me get a few comments here, starting with Luke Anthony Billings, who says, we got it. Means the Falcons still ironing out some kinks, and that's probably true to a certain extent. Kwaku Sanders, though, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, says you can't give up 3 turnovers. You can't have a block punt and win on the road. It won't happen again. Rise up. And I do think the commenter here is making a really good point that some of those miscues, turnovers are obviously disastrous. You know, that kind of turnover margin is going to put you on the wrong side of the win-loss ledger plenty of times, and the block punt just adds to that. We've been through this, but those mistakes were obviously costly against Minnesota last week.
Yeah, they were. And the Falcons, you cannot give up, you can't throw interceptions. You can't give up, easy sacks. You can't let people run through you when it comes to your run defense. But people fix those kind of things. Now, if the Falcons come out this week and you don't see Tack setting the edge, if you don't see the guys inside doing their job, if you don't see Jake Matthews doing a better job protecting, you still got some issues. But you still don't tank and throw in the season. I don't believe that. But you definitely got to do better. You're going to be at home. Now listen, the Falcons are at home. Last week they got embarrassed. The whole world is calling them saying they can't play. If you don't come out and bring the hands and throw some hands at Philadelphia, to me, it has more to do with the mind frame, not the talent. Sometimes your mental is soft, but I don't think that's going to be the Falcons' problem.
I think that's really well said. Carolyn Lombard in our Facebook comment section says, we've got Grady Jarrett, essentially touting him as one of the reasons why Atlanta might play better. And for some of those guys who were bright spots a week ago, Jarrett certainly among them, how do you maximize their impact in a game like this? Because we know, and you did a good job talking about this on Monday, we know that Philadelphia certainly brings the low when it comes to its own defensive line. How does Atlanta counterbalance that with guys like Jarrett, who I don't think anyone could have any complaints about going back to week 1?
Well, Jason Kelsey, Isaac Samolo, Brandon Brooks, the offensive line, they are movers. They are shakers. Now, the Falcons, they got their hands full. They got 2 offensive tackles that are Hall of Famers. I mean, this is an offense that Carson Wentz last week was phenomenal, throwing the ball, almost perfect on 3rd downs. But the Falcons have to bow their necks. They have to play with great leverage and technique. It's not about the physical strength. It's about technique. It's about tack, setting the edge. But not just everybody keeps saying set the edge. Get your hands inside, press, control like you're taught. Like we teach our kids at the youth level. Contain. So all those different things. Keanu Neal, everybody get lined up. So some of the Falcons' problems that we read about in the paper, you can just read it, it was alignment. You know what I'm saying? Ricardo Allen says we weren't lined up. So part of that has to do with the 3-4. They have implemented this hybrid 3-4-4-3.
Yeah.
So there's some challenges there. You know what I'm saying? So when you look at the alignment, sometimes it's about those little things like, are you lined up right?
Right.
So, and that's what affects your fit. And those are things that hurt the Falcons.
Presumably in a 3-4, it's a little bit more difficult to run up the middle, but how about on outside runs where we saw Cook have some success last week? When you make that switch from kind of a base 4-3 into a little bit more of a 3-4 look, how does that impact your ability to set the edge as a defense and cut down and contain some of those outside runs?
Well, number one, it's about technique and the fit.
Yeah.
So again, it's just like a puzzle. Every piece fits together. Outside linebacker, then you got your defensive tackles. But let me talk about specifically about our team. When you put defensive ends as outside linebackers that traditionally used to putting their hands down, that's going to be a challenge for them. It's going to take time for Tack and Vic Beasley to understand all those innuendos of playing outside in a 3-4 situation. But they have to lean on their technique. Strike blocks, get off blocks. Fundamental. That's all they have to do. You're outside the tight end, you're wide. If they come out at you, strike with your hands, have your eyes inside. They have to learn these techniques really fast.
Yeah.
Because they're not traditionally outside linemen. And then I see my boy Adrian Claiborne stand up. I was like, what? Hey, what is he? I was like, they're really running a 3-4. So it shocked me, made me laugh, but AC ain't no stand-up guy.
Hey, a lot of you see what's on my desk right now. A lot of you wonder how you can get yourself one of these. Let me tell you a little bit about this right now. There's a great offer from our friends at the AJC. Of course, this is AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite. And when you go to this website, subscribe.ajc.com/Falcons News Now, there's an entire array of subscription offers you can take advantage of. Whether you want the daily AJC e-paper, you want the Sunday print plus the paper, or if you want 7 days of the print paper delivered right there to your home. A lot of different choices that you can make and a lot of very good savings on all those subscription offers. And when you sign up, you're also going to get this really cool Falcons cooler. You see the Falcons logo there. The website to go to, once again, subscribe.ajc.com/Falcons News Now. You've been getting your AJC Falcons coverage for a long time. The next step of that is to become an AJC subscriber. Get the daily e-paper delivered to you. Get the print paper delivered right there to your doorstep. And do like I've been doing for such a long time. Sit there, enjoy that morning coffee, flip through the paper, find out from D. Orlando Ledbetter, Mark Bradley, Michael Cunningham, Steve Hummer, the entire AJC staff, what's going on with Flowery Branch, with the Atlanta Falcons, and what's going to happen on Sunday against the Philadelphia Eagles. The best way to stay up to date on all of that is to be an AJC subscriber. All right, let me talk to you a moment about a pretty interesting stat that in some respects might make it seem as if Atlanta has a little bit more pressure going into Sunday night against the Philadelphia Eagles. This comes by way of Trey Wingo, the ESPN radio host, working with Mike Golick there in the morning. He tweets out, now this is in reference to Carolina, but obviously there's a little bit of a tie-in to Atlanta here too. Trey says that after starting 0-2, Carolina's in trouble. Since the current playoff format began in 1990, teams that start out 0-2 only make the playoff about 12% of the time, and they're only giving the Panthers a 3.7% chance of making the playoffs after being 0-2. So for Atlanta, who itself is also trying to avoid 0-2 on Sunday against the Philadelphia Eagles, that stat, and Trey Wingo's not the first one to mention this, he's not the first one to bring this up, does that stat cause a Falcons fan to have some concern? Should it cause a Falcons fan to have concern? I mean, how much extra pressure is avoiding 0-2 for Atlanta against the Eagles on Sunday night?
You know, it's interesting, Brandon, good point, but it's really how Dan Quinn handles it. Is he talking about things like that? Because when Dan Reeves was our coach, he told us, here are the percentages if you go 0-2, if you go 0-3. So Dan was kind of open with that, Dan Reeves. So I'm not sure if Dan Quinn talks about that, but numbers are numbers, and fact speaks for themselves. You know, so I agree with those numbers, and they show up all the time. But players, after they go 0-2, then they'll start kind of looking. They'll hear about it because they read the news too. They're going to see this. They're looking at the same things in their locker room. But that's one of those things. After you do go 0-2, it does kind of get alarming, even though we've seen teams come out of it. But it's rare.
So let me try to sell you on something, and this is maybe not even what Falcons fans want to hear, but I think you got to say this. Falcons fans are obviously going to be disappointed if they lose to Philadelphia on Sunday. But even at 0-2, I'm still not pushing the panic button on Atlanta yet, because the numbers that Wingo cites there go back to 1990. We're talking about a day and age when the NFC only had 3 divisions. You had West, you had East, and you had Central.
And I had a kind of like an afro.
Oh, you had the big afro.
I had the high right, low left, like Bobby Brown.
Yeah, no doubt.
So a lot different back in those days.
No doubt. We're talking about going back
we had big we had big brick phones.
Yeah, my prerogative tenderoni days.
All right now.
But when you go back there, you're talking about 3 divisions. It's a lot harder to punch your ticket because the wild cards are going to be more magnified in that situation. Now, though, you get that 4th division in place, and that's still Atlanta's path toward this. As we said before, I've got 0 respect for Carolina right now. I've got 0 respect for Tampa Bay right now. New Orleans is still going to be a grizzly bear to deal with. No one can deny that. But from the Atlanta standpoint, this is not about having the best record in the NFC. This is about being better than 3 other teams: New Orleans, Carolina, and Tampa Bay. And that's still in play, even if you lose to the Eagles on Sunday night.
Yeah, you got to win your division. You got to, especially winning the home games, you got to take care of your business in the division. You got to try to steal one from New Orleans. You can't concede that New Orleans is there. But one thing that's interesting, the first half of the season is littered with what? Division games.
Yeah.
And, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And the second half of the season is with, NFC South teams.
Yeah.
But the Falcons have a good shot. They're going to take care of business there. But you're going to see a lot, again, with this Philly game. You'll see a lot. But it's tough. But you do have a division that is up for grabs. And last night, Carolina looked so bad. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, I thought both those teams looked pretty ugly. But here's the thing, though. Here is what would cause me to come in here on Monday when we do AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite again. Here's what would cause me to come in here and say, ooh, this is a problem. If I don't see the offense moving. If this is one of those deals again where Atlanta's losing a game where they can't get it going offensively. I think when you look at Philadelphia, obviously as good as they are with the group up front, this is a secondary that can be had a little bit. This is this is an opponent in which Atlanta, even with some issues along its offensive line, ought to be able to get the throw game going. And that, to me, is the opportunity. So what I'm going to push the panic button for the Falcons on a little bit on Monday is after 2 weeks you haven't found a way to get that part of this going, the places where you've spent some big-time bucks, if you haven't gotten that going, I'm going to be concerned. But this is a high-scoring, close loss for Atlanta. I think I'm going to shrug my shoulders and say now it's time to move on and get ready for the games that Atlanta's in a better position to win.
And I agree with you. Let me put this on top. I want to see our offensive line man up to Fletcher Cox.
Yeah.
I think it's 9 sacks versus the Falcons in the last 3 games. Man up to Fletcher Cox. Get after Derek Barnett. You know what I'm saying? Brandon Graham, show these guys that you're not intimidated. Because I have guys that are very close, very, super close, as close as you can be to the team.
Yeah.
They think the Falcons are intimidated by them up front.
Okay.
They have bruised up the Falcons. When you look at all the games, it was Fletcher, you see Brandon, you see that lack of respect. So if the Falcons are going to do like what you said, they got to man up. They do got to man up.
So along those lines, Tim Cutlip in our Facebook comment section says he thinks the Falcons need more no-huddle offensive plays to keep the defense on its toes. If this is a game where I think objectively you would say that, hey, I love your idea of manning up against Cox and the rest of these guys to the Philadelphia defensive front, that is probably an area, though, in which Philadelphia does, at least on paper, have the advantage of the Falcons.
It's toughness, though. It comes with toughness.
But can you mitigate this? Can you play faster? Can you move in more no-huddle sets to kind of try to slow down what you think might be an advantage for Philadelphia? Can your style of play give you an edge if you're still talking about Caleb McGarry playing the second NFL game and other guys trying to get used to positions? I mean, can you play faster to help that offensive line group against a tough Philadelphia defensive line?
Well, I definitely think you can play faster. That's a great point, and that is a very great point. But something that you talked about the first week is getting the ball out fast.
Yeah, that's right.
You see what happened last week when there was, Matt Ryan had struggled. He was drifting back.
Yeah.
A lot of those plays he was drifting back, and there was some pressure coming. But to me, that's exactly. I'd like to see the Falcons put a wrinkle in, but this is what I want to see the Falcons do. I want to see them put Ridley in position to take some deep shots.
Yeah, me too.
Julio, we know he's going to be bracket.
Yeah.
We know, all the things they're going to do to Julio, but I would like to see him setting it up. I'd like to see Sanu, but I want Ridley to have a bigger role in this to help Julio, get over.
I think that's a big potential point. And Angelia McGill also makes a good point on Facebook. Angelia says, improving our offensive line and Matt Ryan's going to take care of business, rise up. So let's go back to that. How much of this, now you touched on it before, how much of this is about the mentality that you operate with, just getting tough against a tough defensive front? I mean, how much improvement can you expect from this offensive line, especially with the disappointing news going back to Sunday that Lidstrom's now dealing with an injury? How much improvement from the offensive line can be expected?
Yeah, it's tough because you get a cohesiveness when you're a line that plays together. Now you got Lidstrom out, but how you do it is you got veterans. You just come together and you work, but what you do is you slide protect to Cox.
Yeah.
You make it harder. You get the ball out quicker. And what I would do on McGarry's side, you got to chip block him. You got to do everything you can to break down the defensive end. Chip block was when the running back comes over and hits that defensive end, just for our viewer standpoint. That you got to do those kind of things. And let me tell you something that's underrated somewhat from a lot of folks who haven't played the game. You got to get nasty and get into a game that Fletcher Cox, I can promise you this, he's not used to somebody cheap shotting him in the back. He's not used to somebody mashing him down. Because I'm telling you, last year, if you watch the Philadelphia Eagles, actually what the Eagles did to Aaron Donald in the game last year, that was a big game. Aaron Donald's not used to that. Fletcher Cox, do some stuff, rattle him up, become nasty. Take a 15-yard penalty and knock his head off. That's the NFL way the tough teams do it. I can tell you this, if you go watch Philadelphia last year against the Falcons, they were doing all that kind of stuff to the Falcons, doing all kind of cheap stuff. And I remember, Graham got a personal foul from hitting one of the guys in the back. But guess what? It woke the Falcons up.
That's really interesting. Matt Ryan, though, this week, and talking about what he wants to see from that Falcons offense, obviously he knows that some of the outcomes last week took some of the plays out of the Falcons playbook, and he says this week that can't happen. Here's Ryan on what he wants to see from his offense against Philadelphia.
We have to stay ahead of the chains as we play games, and then we can't get behind like we did the other night in order to run the football the way that we wanted to. I thought when we did, we had a couple nice runs, some things that we did well, but we just didn't have enough opportunities, and so that's going to be key for us this Sunday too, is to stay in front of the chains, make sure that we're productive first and second down, so that we keep all of the plays that we have on the table for us.
It is true, though, right? When you get down early, the offense at that point in time is going to become more predictable, and that can't happen. I mean, Atlanta's the one that dug its own hole with that against the Minnesota Vikings, but that is one of those things that you hope that you can strike some of those. You mentioned Calvin Ridley. We got people, Luke Anthony Billingsley, talking about in the comment section too. Get these receivers involved in the game early so that you can keep Devontae Freeman involved in the game late. The rest of this Falcons running game. When you're down multiple scores in the second half, you're taking those running backs off the field almost.
Well, defensive teams, what they want to do is make another team one-dimensional. Minnesota made the Falcons one-dimensional really fast. So it limited what the Falcons could do. But I like to see Freeman getting there, but I would like to see a few screens, things like that. But when you get the ball, you got to make some plays. But we've also talked about the defensive challenge a little bit. I mean, the offensive line challenges. It affects the running back. It affects Matt. So it starts up front. They'll do a better job protecting, but this is going to be a slobber knocker kind of game. They've got to get down and dirty.
There's also a big issue on the side for Philadelphia that's worth paying attention to. We'll talk about that coming up. Let me take a few comments before we get there, though. Blake Robinson checking in, saying, "Rise up, go Falcons." Blake, we appreciate that. I mentioned some good comments from Luke Anthony Billingsley a little bit earlier. Jimmy People says we got the rust off in week one. And sometimes in college football, you hear a lot of coaches say, hey, the most improvement you show in a season is from week one to week two. I've always presumed that for NFL teams, that may be less the case because we're talking about professionals. Is there a week one to week two improvement in the NFL the way we commonly think of it taking place in college football?
Well, I think it's a 2-3-4. Because think about this. Caleb McGarry, he's only played one game. That's true. You understand what I'm saying? Julio made a point this week to say, I wasn't exactly, at my best in this game. So, everybody's, gets better in the second game. So will the Eagles, too. Speaking of the Falcons definitely get better. You'll see Julio get better. Freeman hadn't ran. When's the last time he ran live in live? Has he? In really live action. So a lot of guys, they want a lot of live action they have. But I definitely think the Falcons will be better in week two than they were in week one.
Terrence Carney wants to talk about the Falcons defense. We'll do that coming up. It's AJC Falcons News Now. It's sponsored by Miller Lite. That's the former Atlanta Falcon, Chuck Smith. Now, later on in the show, Chuck's always really good at bringing in some cool artifacts. I'm a big sports collector, so I like seeing this stuff. And by the way, hearkening back to some good days against the Philadelphia Eagles, I don't mind seeing Randall Cunningham on his back there, the same as he was in the 98 NFC Championship game a couple times, too, for what it's worth. So we'll do some of that fun stuff before we're done on today's show, and good to have you with us. And really thank Miller Lite for making it all possible. The original light beer, at just 96 calories, it tastes great. It's also the official beer of the Atlanta Falcons, and they're with us for AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite all season long. All right, let's talk about the Falcons defense for a moment because, as I said, Terrence Carney watching us on Facebook wants to do that. And one of the real challenges, based on what we saw on Sunday for Philadelphia against Washington, the game that got a little closer later, but man, Deshaun Jackson, the Eagles wide receiver, he's bounced around, but he's back where he's had his best moments in his career thus far, and there's something about seeing Jackson in that Eagles uniform that brings back memories of tough battles against this team before and successful days for the Philadelphia offense. I would imagine that getting ready for Sunday, Deshaun Jackson, that Eagles wide receiver, is one of those names that the Falcons in their preparations in Flowery Branch have to think about as much as maybe anybody on this offense right now.
And you're exactly right. Keanu Neal also, Ricardo Allen, going to have to make some decisions when it comes to playing over the top. Which you got Isaiah Oliver, you got Trufant. So this is not only just two guys on the edge. Everybody says, oh, it's the cornerbacks, going against Deshaun Jackson. But this guy is absolutely can take the top off, and shame on Chip Kelly years ago running him out of town. How about that?
Yeah.
How'd that look?
Yeah, bad.
But
by the way, Chip Kelly's also ruined UCLA's program as well. So Chip Kelly, not exactly successful in his last couple coaching stops, at least thus far.
Yeah, but Jackson, huge weapon. I mean, the Falcons have to be accountable for who he is. I mean, the Eagles, they got a running game. They got a jitterbug and Sproles.
Yeah.
They got maybe the best offensive line in football. This is a huge challenge, but you have to take away the deep pass and try to limit the passing game, and the Falcons have a lot better shot, with the Eagles running. I'd rather take on the running game.
Interesting.
You know what I'm saying, than get that passing game going.
The game will be primetime on Sunday night on the network is NBC, and one of the guys broadcasting that game is Chris Collinsworth. At the end of the game this past Sunday with the Patriots and the Steelers, looking ahead to next Sunday, obviously Jackson was on Collinsworth's mind. Here's what he said.
You kind of got the feeling all year during the course of that camp, they were sort of whispering his name, weren't they? They were sort of talking about it, and then all of a sudden you saw why, and Carson Wentz, he looked like the old Carson Wentz, who was maybe on his way to an MVP season before he got hurt a couple years ago.
And then much the same way on
Wasn't
that.
Alshon Jeffrey real quick?
Pardon me?
Wasn't that Alshon Jeffrey, though?
It could have been.
I think that was
the former South Carolina Gamecock. It certainly could have been instead of the Cal Bayer Deshaun Jackson, but certainly they'll be identifying Jackson on the field coming up on Sunday. And somebody else talking about that, in addition to Collinsworth, was Tony Dungy, obviously former Super Bowl winning coach and a member of that NBC pregame team. Here's what he said about the challenge awaiting the Falcons when it comes to stopping D-Jax.
Well, one more thing that defense is going to have to worry about this week, Deshaun Jackson. He looked like he's building a chemistry with Carson Wentz. They hit some big plays last week.
I mean, I think chemistry is important here because when you have a veteran receiver like this, and listen, Wentz is now an established quarterback in the NFL, but when you're able to find that rhythm with a guy, it's the kind of thing they're going to be looking to dial up over and over again. I love your point about how much of this game is going to be taking place near the line of scrimmage. I don't disagree with that. And yet when it comes to the Falcons' ability to match the big plays that Philadelphia's bringing to the table, I think the source of a lot of those big plays, my expectation would be, it'll be like it was against Washington this past Sunday. It'll be Deshaun Jackson.
Well, hope it won't be like it was for Washington last week.
Yeah.
And I'll start with a 0.
Right.
0 sacks.
Yeah.
Think about that. So this Eagles offensive line, they gave up 0 sacks. So when you got that kind of protection, you can find D-Jack. Carson Wentz has time in the pocket. It helps you with Zach Ertz. So the Falcons have to get pressure. And think about this. 3 of the top 5 guys in the league with pressures last week were Eagles. It was Graham, Derek Barnett, and Fletcher Cox.
Yeah.
3 of the 5 had the most pressures in the league. So, when you think about that, the Falcons' defensive line, they have to kind of do what the Eagles did. They have to get pressure. But, man, this D-Jack and those guys are something phenomenal.
I want to talk to you in a moment about Dan Quinn's response to what happened on Sunday and his very candid statement that he was very upset, more so than he's been in a while. We'll hear that from Quinn going back to the beginning of this week earlier, or I should say coming up in just a moment. That's Chuck Smith, the former Atlanta Falcon. My name is Brandon Adams. You're watching AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite. And, of course, for those of you that like getting as much Falcons coverage as you possibly can, you're reading D. Orlando Ledbetter and the rest of the staff here at AJC.com. Dive deeper to the next level with your Falcons coverage by becoming an AJC subscriber. And when you do, courtesy of our program here on AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite, you also get yourself a great opportunity to take advantage of a great offer right now. How about this Falcons cooler that I'm holding on to? I have in my hand right here. Great opportunity for your tailgate. Some of you are going to be getting going early on Sunday afternoon, watching some of those 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock games before the Falcons kick off later on that night. Keep your beverages cool down in style here with this Atlanta Falcons AJC branded cooler. Let me give you the website to go to. It's subscribe.ajc.com/Falcons News Now and find out about all the choices that are there. Whether you want the e-paper, you want the print paper delivered to you all 7 days, you want a little bit of a combination of both. The great news is, whichever option you choose, it's great savings in every single regard, and as an incentive for your subscription, Also, this Atlanta Falcons branded cooler, really good stuff. Subscribe.ajc.com/Falcons News Now for a lot more on that. All right, I want to talk to you about your feelings after some of the tough losses you may have suffered during your career. And as a way of setting that up, I want to hear from Dan Quinn. When he spoke to reporters at the beginning of this week, did not mince words. He knows what was at stake for his team going back to week one. He knows the disappointment that was out there for Falcons fans about the way that Atlanta played. And Quinn said he's right there with you in terms of being upset about it himself. Here is Dan Quinn getting right to the point about his feelings about the Vikings.
Last night, I was more pissed off than I've been in a long time. We've had tough losses. There's a lot of preparation, a lot of buildup, that goes on to start the season, the energy. To have that right, sometimes it can feel like an Olympic race. You're ready to go and false start, and you're out of it before you even get going. So I watched it again last night when I got home, watched it again this morning. And the reason I was so mad is because we didn't do what we said we were going to do, and we didn't do what we were capable of doing. The coach in me always wants the 1-0, but if you had to have an 0-1, the teacher in me said you better apply the lessons. At a -3 turnover margin, a block punt, not playing in the run game and controlling the edges like we were capable of, there were a lot of lessons.
So listen, you obviously understand where he's coming from on that, and you get the impression based on what Quinn said after the game on Sunday, what Matt Ryan also said this week, I think they truly do think they were prepared. I think they thought they had a good game plan. I think they thought they were buttoned up and ready to go, and then it gets taken from you as early as it did in the first quarter. I take him at his word when he says that.
But I don't mean to interrupt, Brandon.
Please.
Julio Jones came out and kind of said that, well, I'm not quite, I wasn't at my best the week before. You understand what I'm saying? So to me, it's...
He mentioned some health issues and
things
like that.
Some health issues, but from my standpoint, I think it has a lot to do with the frustration of Q. It has to be. We done paid you guys. We got one of the highest paid D tackles, one of the highest paid receivers, one of the highest paid quarterbacks, one of the highest paid running backs. Running backs, receivers. So we I got what I got, but also it trickles down with Arthur Blank. But I understand why he's pissed. I totally get it because you worked all off season.
Yeah.
You've talked about Minnesota for 4 months. You had them on the board. You talk about them, all the stuff that happens in the, the meeting rooms, and you come out and get embarrassed, and you're trying to build a fan base that you're trying to build momentum. I understand why he's pissed, but I also understand why the fans are pissed. I totally get it.
So let me ask you this, though, because I think of Quinn as being kind of a player's coach. Of course, I'm not, behind closed doors in the locker room. I don't know what it's really like. I saw a year's worth of Hard Knocks. Right. I guess that gives me some indication, but probably a little bit of a misnomer on that as well. But how much does anger work here? We're talking about pros. We're talking about veterans in many cases. You're an emotional guy. I'm sure you used emotion well during your NFL career. But for Quinn to say what he says there, and I'm sure he's sending that message during practice as well, how much does that message of anger work, and how much of this is shake it off, let's get back to work, and how much of this is turning over a table in the meeting room?
Well, I tell you what it is. Anger is really important, and let me tell you why. When you're embarrassed, you're going to play harder. You're going to do everything. The first quarter, like you'll hear, the Eagles will say, we got to weather the storm because we know they're angry and they're going to play a lot tougher. That's how it goes. But remember, I just talked to you kind of off the air about that first quarter is huge.
Yeah.
Anger can carry you in the first quarter. You're going to hit him in the mouth, but the other team weather the storm like you're a boxer. He comes out fast. So the first quarter, the Falcons will come out fast. They're going to throw some blows. After that, in your technique and all your team, the adjustments will be made by Philly. Now what do you do? Now it's all about scheme and where you put in the work. But I think anger, that's a good start.
So let's keep it real with this for a moment.
Okay.
If anger really does help propel you here, I think one of Matt Ryan's strengths is his stoicism, the fact that he does not seem to get publicly very angry about much. Now, get set and some of that kind of stuff that he screamed out in the game before. We can think of some examples where he's shown a little bit of an emotional side, but one of his strengths other than that is kind of his stoicism. Julio Jones, for the most part, is kind of a business-like, professional-minded player. He's kind of a stoic player too. So who brings that emotion? Who brings that energy? If that's important, who's going to bring it?
Now, I disagree with you on this.
Okay.
Matt Ryan is cussing out in the preseason. Matt Ryan was cussing people out. Matt Ryan's on this ain't the 6 years ago. Matt Ryan is absolutely aggressive towards his guys on the sideline, on the field, and he brings out a lot of emotion. Hey, Matt, put that hat on. But to me, Matt Ryan is the leader, and he's taking that role. So the one thing all the fans used to always talk about, you don't hear that anymore because I see Matt Ryan giving it to him. Now, I would like to see Julio one day, snatch a few guys up, but that's not his personality. Like on defense, that's not great his personality. That's kind of Ricardo Allen, but I like Matt Ryan. But I want to see more of that. I just do. I want to see guys have that mentality, like the Eagles. I mean, let's be real. The Eagles have that. Everybody's emotional.
A little bit of an edge.
The whole game.
Your team.
They're quick twitch the whole game.
Let me take a few comments here. Mike Dodon wants to talk about Julio Jones. We're going to get to that in a moment. Tim Cutlett says, this is really nice to hear, Tim. I appreciate this. He says, love this show. Keep up the great work, guys. You got a great synergy, and go Falcons. I'm going to see you back here on Monday. And he says we're going to be back even at 1-1. Tim, I really appreciate that. And for those of you who are watching the show and having a good time, do us a huge favor. One of the things you can do is share this show with your Facebook friends on Facebook. Over the course of the season, we hope to be building some more video platforms for you to check us out on. But for right now, the best way for us to access the largest number of people is right here on Facebook. You can help us do that by sharing the show on Facebook or just telling your friends when you're hanging out the tailgate or the watch party on Sunday, hey, there's a great new show. It's on the AJC Atlanta Falcons News Now Facebook pages every Monday and Friday at 1 p.m. Chuck Smith's on here, some other blowhards on there talking with him. We're having a good time. Come on by and be with us and tell people to be a part of it. It's all sponsored by Miller Lite. It's AJC Falcons News Now. A couple other comments I want to get to before we kind of move on a little bit more deeply to what's going on with the Falcons Julio Jones situation. Teresa Spear putting the attention back on the offensive line. Teresa says that the offensive line just needs to do its job and the run-pass game is going to open up. And you've kind of said that as well, especially facing the challenge. And listen, I mean, you got to call it what it is. A week after you had a rough time against the defensive line, for the most part, Philadelphia is not necessarily the team you want to see, but this is what you get paid to do: go out there and battling against big successful defensive linemen like this.
I hate when people say he's the scared. Nobody's scared out there now.
I'm not saying scared. I'm just saying there are easier defensive lines to play against than this one.
Yeah, but again, this Falcons offensive line, you're getting paid to do a job.
Sure.
But the Falcons, when you look at things like that, Brandon, the mentality you go out there, you have to have the confidence to go out there and expect to win. But I think the Falcons right now, they got to circle the wagons and come out and show the national audience this is a team, because everybody watches now. The eye in the sky, all the other teams, 31 teams, 30 teams are going to be watching, outside of that. So.
Yeah. I like Richie Satterwhite's comment, who says, we need the offensive line to step up, and we're going to put 30-plus on the board. So that's my point.
Okay.
You find 30 for Atlanta on Sunday. You find 28 for Atlanta on Sunday. If you lose 34-28, you lose 34-30, I'm going to tell you Atlanta's in good shape. But if it's one of those deals where we saw a low-scoring game 2 Thursdays ago, saw a low-scoring game last night.
Not at all.
If Atlanta's scuffling along in kind of a low-scoring game, that's where you have yourself a little bit of a problem. If Atlanta can find a way to get near that 30 number, that to me is a pretty strong indicator of what the rest of the season could look like.
I think the Falcons are going to get after it. I really believe it. I know everybody in the season's like, oh, we got the Eagles. We got the Eagles. I think the Falcons will come out and put up big numbers. I think they're going to run. I think they're going to throw the ball. But I think what's going to stand out the most this week is Matt Ryan and the offensive line. I'm telling you, I got a good feeling about what's happening. I just really do. So I really think the Falcons will come up, air it out, have a great game. Now, I don't know about necessarily the run, but I think the Falcons are going. I think Ridley's going to open it up. Watch out for Ridley and Hooper this week. Julio late in this game. I really believe Ridley's going to step up.
So I told you that Mike Dodon wanted to talk about Julio Jones. He had the idea of using Julio more in the slot, which is kind of an interesting point to bring up. But Julio this week, in talking about the situation, some previous games against Philadelphia, they come down to the last minute, come down to the wire, issues in the red zone. That's been kind of an issue that has come up with Julio a lot. Finding touchdowns, finding ways to use him in short yardage situations. But for the most part, with Philadelphia being the opponent this week, Julio kind of downplayed whatever has happened in the red zone in some of these key games in the past. In fact, here's a little taste of that from Julio right now.
Not at all. Not at all. Each game is the same. Like, this is a big game for us because it's the next game. And we're doing everything we can out here on this practice field to be ready for the game.
In fact, Jones even went on to say that he doesn't even think Atlanta should spend more time practicing against that red zone stuff with Philadelphia coming in, that he doesn't want to make too much of the historic precedent of what's happened against the Eagles before. Here's more from Julio.
Not at all, because, it's year to year. So happily, the last 2 years or whatever we played them, it came to the red zone. But it might not be the red zone, this game. So it's not one of those things to close my mind off to everything else can possibly happen in the game and focus on the red zone if I'm not doing it before we get to the red zone.
So listen, I agree with Julio that I don't think you make too much of what's happening. Every season is its own season, every game is its own storyline here. But in hearing him speak on those terms, it is a reminder of of kind of what's gone in the past of making sure you get Julio involved in touchdown situations, red zone situations. Make sure you get him involved in the moments in the game that matter the most.
See, I see it a lot different than a lot of people.
Okay.
I'm actually tired of them trying to force the ball to Julio.
Is that right?
They're throwing screens to Julio. They're trying to do the best teams have a diversity when it comes to wide receivers. And you talking about the Saints. What's making the Saints so good? They're getting it around to everyone. So to me, the Falcons have to find more than Julio. And I like the creativity of the screen, but Ridley's more of a quick twitch kind of screen kind of guy. You know what I mean? And they started, trying to force that to Julio. And I disagree. One thing else that Julio said, y'all need to work on the red zone and keep being creative so you won't be one-dimensional, because everything we think of is Julio. No one really talks about getting the other guys in the offense, but Julio's the big play. When those other guys start making plays, Julio will start making more plays.
Blake Robinson says, I think Philadelphia's secondary is suspect, which is good for the offense to get Julio and Ridley loose. But the way Vernon Davis got loose on them, I wouldn't be shocked if Hooper gets loose for a big game there as well. So get your tight end involved, get Ridley, get Jones involved. I do think Philadelphia provides that opportunity in the back end of that defense. I agree. By the way, Carolyn Trotsky-Lombard also bringing up, did you see Julio's Waffle House cleats he's wearing earlier this week?
Fresh.
I should have shown the picture of those on the screen. I like those Waffle House cleats. Yeah, it's very, very Atlanta-centric. By the way, if you could have worn some of your own cleats, what would you have worn?
Man, probably back in those days.
A little 706 area code, maybe?
Nope, I'd have wore something from.
Don't tell me orange and white. Don't give me the
I might have threw a tent. Back then we were rolling. We were like kind of
the checkerboard.
In '98 when we went to the Super Bowl. We were also we were the national champs. So, that's a good question. Back in those days I was a big WWE.
Yeah.
WCW fan.
Back then, for sure.
And I think Goldberg was the champ back then. I probably wore something with Goldberg on it.
I don't mind
and that year, that '98 year, Goldberg became the champ.
Yeah, I don't mind that
I probably wore big Goldie's shoes.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. By the way, there's Nino the Rhino right there, looking nice.
Fat Nino the Rhino.
No, come on now, you're going to be playing weight. I like to see that.
I was.
What is it, the media guide picture?
I couldn't even grow a beard back then. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Well, that's good stuff to see. All right. By the way, we're going to look back at Chuck's career a little bit more before we're done here on AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite. The original light beer. Tastes great. It's just 96 calories. When you're getting ready to enjoy your tailgate or your watch party this week, my advice is that Miller Lite is an exceptional choice, the official beer of the Atlanta Falcons. Before we get back to Atlanta, though, let me bounce around the league here a little bit. Let's look at some of these key Week 2 games for a moment, and we'll kind of give some quick thoughts on a few of these as we see future Atlanta opponents show up here. We see pecking order. First of all, the world loves Baltimore this week against Arizona. Arizona got a gift tie.
Oh, they're going to win it all. They're the best team ever. Come on, man.
This game's going to be, I'm telling you right now, Arizona-Baltimore is closer than the experts think.
Yeah, man. Like I said, now everybody's saying, Baltimore has a chance to get to the AFC Championship. Or the Falcons, they're not going to win another game. Calm down, folks. Ravens did a good job. They beat up a team that can't play.
I would not watch the 49ers-Bengals if it was in my backyard. Former Super Bowl rematch. Chargers-Lions, essentially the same thing. Yep. Minnesota-Green Bay is a good game. That's a really good game. I think that Green Bay, I know they're kind of a public team in terms of big fan base, but undervalued at the start of the season. I think I said this going to the Chicago game. I'll say this about Minnesota coming into Lambeau as well. Watch out for Green Bay here.
I'm interested to see how that offense does for Green Bay.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Aaron Rodgers, they weren't all that good last time, but I'm interested to see how they go.
Pay attention to Houston. Atlanta's got a big stretch of games coming against AFC South teams. Those are games where Atlanta needs to get fat. This AFC South may end up being a better division, you might think, though. And Gardner Minshew, by the way, the former Wazoo quarterback, a little eccentric, but playing for the Jaguars, that's actually pretty entertaining.
Exactly is. Nate, they got some bad luck at quarterback, right?
Foles got hurt. By the way, we had a commenter earlier that said the Falcons should trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick. Have you seen that every one of these Dolphins?
Shame.
Every single one of them went out of this team. I told y'all last week, this bunch is tanking. They're giving up on the season. They're like 20-point underdogs to New England in their own stadium on Sunday. The Miami Dolphins are an embarrassment to the NFL.
The Tua watch?
I think it's Tua. I think
you
it's
think
tanked
so?
for Tua. Although I'm not sure I'd take Tua number 1 overall. But
who'd you take?
I don't know.
Kid from Oregon. Who's the kid from Oregon?
Justin Herbert.
Yeah.
He's not bad. I mean, I think that Tua needs to play better against good defenses. He needs to play better against good defenses. Not have his best games last year against the best defenses he saw. Let's do a few more of these here real quick. Buffalo Giants. The Giants are terrible. Buffalo may be kind of interesting. Seahawks, Steelers. Boy, bad week for the Steelers last week.
Steelers look bad.
Here's one to pay attention to because these are both future Falcons opponents. Colts and Titans. Titans looked good last week against Tennessee. Indianapolis was not terrible in L.A. Be careful with the Colts and Titans right now.
All right,
be careful.
Derrick Henry, they're pretty good on fantasy, big guy.
There you
Keep
go.
it up. It's one of my running backs.
I think that Washington can be a little bit of a live underdog there. Chiefs and Raiders, that might be fun. Oakland got a win on Monday Night Football.
I like the Raiders.
Bears, Broncos. Is that doing
Denver
anything for
looks
you?
terrible right now.
Boy, they did not look good. Saints Rams is a good game. Watch out for the Saints going way out west and winning that game.
Saints speak for themselves, bro.
Yeah. How about the Jets, by the way, on Monday night? Now, first of all, for all the wrong reasons, Jets-Browns probably pretty good. You know that Darnold's got like mono or something like that?
Nah. I did hear about that.
I mean, how you going to be an NFL quarterback and get mono?
Who knows?
I don't want to speculate, but that's not a good situation.
I don't know. How long is he probably be out? What, a couple weeks?
They said indefinitely.
Ooh.
They're paying him like however many first-round quarterback money
Never heard
to
of
have
that.
mono. That's not a good situation.
Never heard of that.
Blake Robinson says Cardinals-Ravens going to be a shootout. He says you take the over, book it. So pretty good advice there from Blake Robinson on that.
Thank you,
I
Blake.
think that Baltimore is overvalued coming off the Dolphins game. I think the Dolphins are historically bad. But let me turn our attention back here to Atlanta on Sunday night against Philadelphia, and Dan Quinn here once again. You got to admit it, when you have a team like Philadelphia coming in, a chance for Eagles fans to be in the building, a chance for Atlanta fans to respond to that. You know, listen, we have a history in Atlanta for whatever reason, sports fans being kind of late arriving to the stadium, just kind of slow in getting there. Tailgate's fun, whatever you're watching the 4 o'clock games.
The Falcon fans come late.
Y'all
They're there in the new stadium. They're just kind of kicking it around.
They're all up there in them luxury suites.
There's
There's like a luxury suite in every corner of the stadium. Dan Quinn says, get in your seats and make some noise. Here's Quinn going back to earlier this week.
What we talked about as a team today is how excited we are to get in front of our home fans. And we know firsthand the effect they can have on the game. We're encouraging everybody to get there early, get it cranked up from the opening kickoff on. So we're all pumped. We're kind of talking about as a team today, you know, the effect that we can have and they can have. And so, man, we're ready to get rocking.
I mean, listen, how much as a former player, especially a guy like you on defense, how much you're feeding off the crowd when it's making a lot of noise out there?
Major. It's huge. I mean, it gets you. It kind of gives you energy. It's like everybody versus the other team. And as a pass rusher, it'll absolutely help Vic. It'll help Grady because when they can't hear and it's a raucous situation, you get gone and they really can't hear. The other team can't.
Yeah.
They won't be able to hear on the field. But just from a change in the perception of the Atlanta Falcons, you know, I'd like for them, the fans, to be there, but it's been like that forever.
Well, there's kind of a weird thing.
It's always been that way.
It's kind of a weird thing, too, where, you know, Atlanta and Philadelphia are not considered NFL rivals because they're not in the same division. They don't really, you know, necessarily play every year. But, boy, there have been some high-profile matchups, whether it be, I may get my years slightly wrong, was it 2004 NFC Championship game?
In Philly.
Yeah, in Philly
Yep.
when Vic played.
Vic.
Season opener in 2005, a little bit of a scuffle before the start of the game. High-profile playoff games a couple times since then, or I should say a high-profile game since then. You had
What kind of become a
Vic
rival?
played the Eagles in the playoffs twice, right?
Yeah, twice.
You were up there, part of that one. Was it 03 you guys go up there? So there's actually more history with the Falcons and Eagles, you might think.
Kind of like a rivalry. We've
Yeah.
created somewhat of a good rivalry versus those guys. And to me, it kind of started with the Vic thing.
Yeah.
Because we were so fired up about Mike Vick going up there, but the Eagles were tough.
Yeah, Caroline Lombard says it's truth. No one in their seats in the first quarter. The Atlanta Hawks also had kind of a funny tweet about this the other day. The Atlanta sports fan just got to find a way to get through traffic or whatever, but get in your seat. I mean, I do think on Sunday Night Football, the thing that you love to hear, if you're watching the game on TV, you love to hear that crowd making that noise and it feel like a big-time atmosphere. I'm telling you right now, watching that thing in Charlotte last night, you could have been playing that game in a mausoleum.
Right.
There wasn't any noise coming from anywhere. You don't want. I don't think that's going to be the case in Atlanta on Sunday night. You want the home crowd to be a big part of this if you're a Falcons fan.
And I encourage Falcon fans that are watching to get there early. But
Yeah.
you know what? I think Arthur Blank's doing something that's really going to help. The parking. Improve,
Yeah.
You know, some of the things that, you know, might not be there now, but some of the parking has
Yeah.
some challenges around where we are. But I know Arthur and, you know, the team are trying to create
Yeah, they've
more
done a good
spacing.
job with some of that kind of stuff to make it,
create more spacing.
more accessible situation, all that kind of stuff. It's a beautiful stadium too.
Yeah, it is. This is something this is more of a personal opinion about.
Please, by all
It
means.
just seems like the national media, Atlanta has become such a popular city.
Yeah.
You know, teams are good, you know, got the new Benz, got the basketball. I don't know if it's called some side-eye hate a little bit, because
Yeah.
the first thing they talk about with the Falcons is the crowd.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, even when they were doing good in the Super Bowl year,
Right.
they kept, you know, they'd show, you know, things like that. So to me, you know, it's, you know, like I got some friends, they live down here, they've been down here 15 years, and they're like, yeah, New York and the Meadowlands, we're terrible, but
Right.
I'm like, well, why you down here then? Why don't you go back up?
Yeah, so
There's
listen,
a little bit of hate I get from my personal friends
You're
about
gonna
it.
get me started on this
Yeah.
now, because there is a lot of that where, like, a lot of these guys are like, hey, you know, look how, you know, great the Meadowlands is, no matter how
Right.
bad the Giants are. I'm sorry, I've seen some of these games. These stadiums are not full necessarily,
No.
And you know, some of these, you know, supposedly, you know, great Northeastern fans. I mean, let Philadelphia go 5-11. Let's see how many people are packing. Is it
Right.
you know, Lincoln Financial Field at the end of the stadium? Let's see how many people are packing the Link there at that point in time. They're going to come down here. They like it because the weather's better. They like it because the quality of life is better. They like all that kind of stuff. But I believe the Atlanta Falcons fans respond in a big way. I think they make Dan Quinn good on his guarantee that it ends up being a big-time home field advantage for Atlanta.
Yeah, I think the Falcons have an opportunity to, you know, be raucous because the crowd is going to be there.
Yeah.
But on the other end of the spectrum, Eagles fans find a way to
Yeah.
get tickets, and that green stands out. But I think Dan Quinn coming out, I see the organization, you know, putting stuff out on social media. I'd even like the players to kind of, hey man, you guys come out and be there
Yeah,
early.
I love that.
Because that would, you know, that would be like a Julio Jones come out and say, hey guys, won't you be, you know, come early to the game, and we'd like to have your support.
Joe Ricard says Falcons are 2-0 and home openers to the Bend, so pay attention to that. All right, speaking of Falcons and Eagles and the history of the organization, one of the things that Chuck does for us every week, and I always love this because I'm a student of history of sports, especially the Atlanta franchises. How about some hearkening back to the past? Kind of an old school, big time artwork from the AJC.
AJC.
How about Curtis Compton, who, by the way,
Yep.
going to be taking some great pictures for the AJC again this weekend too. That's
he's
a good
still
one.
working? He's still working at
Absolutely,
AJC?
he's killing it. Yeah, Curtis Compton nailing it with Nano the Rhino there.
Yeah.
Look at Randall Cunningham on his back.
Yep. So they brought Reggie White and the whole crew in. Randall.
Yeah.
This was the first time I ever got 3 sacks. The first year I ever had 10 sacks. Awesome day at the Georgia
Yeah.
Dome. I mean, we got after those guys in here.
Now I will say, that's a pretty fun Eagles team to watch.
Oh, they
Back
were
when
good.
Reggie was there, Clyde Simmons is
No,
there.
they were real good.
Yeah, it's a fun
Seth
team.
Joyner, they were real
Yeah,
good.
it's a pretty fun team.
I
to
was
watch.
22 years old.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I used to love Randall Cunningham.
I did too, but it was awesome because I got family in New Jersey.
Hard
So
got a sack too, right?
Who?
Randall Cunningham.
Yeah, I got 3 of them.
Well, but I'm saying it's not easy to do.
Oh
though.
no, it's not easy. But it became easy. I got him in Minnesota too.
That's
well,
what
here's
you
the
do
game
for
ball.
a living, yeah.
Yeah, 1994. So I kind of like going against Randall.
How much fun has it been? Because for those of you who may not be aware, here's part of AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite. Chuck has promised that he's going to bring in a piece of his career to every show.
Or someone else too.
Or someone else too. Yeah, he's got stuff from every.
Deion. Next week I'm gonna bring the.
No, come on now.
I'm gonna bring the
serious?
Deion. No, the Deion Sanders, the first, the first creation of the diamond,
Really?
diamond turf. The
Really?
diamond turf. I got them signed. The original ones I got in 92.
Man, it's about to get serious in
I'll
here
tell
with
you the
some of
story
that.
one time. I'll just tell you when I got them real quick, and I'll tell the story next week. I got the shoes, and later on, I hung out with Deion, Snoop Dogg, and Dr. Dre.
How about that?
You know, Deion was the man.
Listen,
I was like the roadie back then. I was rolling.
Who are you telling? You better believe he was. Anybody who was in Atlanta around that time can tell you that. But how much fun has it been to kind of go back through and think about this kind of stuff that in some cases you may not have thought about in a while.
Yeah.
Sacking Randall Cunningham, things like that. We joke, but seriously, that's a great memory. How much fun do you have kind of going back and look at those moments from your career?
I do now because a lot of times I don't really get a chance, nor do I try to talk about, it's
Yeah.
in the past. My kids, they don't really even know much about my career. I never been one to go back because when I retired, it was over. You know what I mean? I'm not one to say I wish because I got the most out of where I'm at. But when I look back, it's almost like it wasn't me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Happened to somebody else.
It's almost like it was a whole nother life, which it was. So, gosh, I go back and I can't remember everything that happened, but some of the times, I'll go back and I'll look at this and reminisce. But it's
By the way,
awesome.
Brian Hall, he said he had the Deion Diamond turf shoes. He loved.
He
those
did?
shoes. Yeah, so tune in Monday, Brian. You get a chance to
Too
see
legit
those.
to quit back in the day.
And
now.
hopefully, for Falcons fans' sake, on Monday, you get a chance to tune in and hear us talk about a Falcons win against the Philadelphia Eagles.
They're going to win.
One thing for sure, it's going to be an entertaining game on Sunday night.
Oh,
for
no
sure.
doubt.
Look forward to doing that. And Chuck, hope you have a great weekend. I look forward to seeing you back here on Monday at 1 p.m.
Yep.
And as we said before, make sure you tell family, your friends, everybody you tailgate with or watch games with, we're talking Falcons football every Monday and Friday going through the 2019 season. It's AJC Falcons News Now. It's sponsored by Miller Lite. Huge thanks to Miller Lite for making it possible. The original light beer, the official beer of the Atlanta Falcons. We could not do that without them. Also, on the way out the door, I'll remind you that if you want to get the best Falcons coverage of the game after the game on Sunday, the best way to do that is become a subscriber to the AJC. Subscribe.ajc.com/Falcons News Now. Choose from the e-paper or home delivery or kind of everything in between. And as a thank you for joining up as a subscriber to the AJC, how about this Atlanta Falcons branded AJC cooler? A great way to enjoy some beverages at your tailgate. Y'all have a great, great weekend. Enjoy the game on Sunday. We'll see you back here Monday for AJC Falcons News Now, sponsored by Miller Lite.